Once again, my name is Aaron Kaplan. I'm the managing partner of Promise Partners, and I'm here to introduce our next workshop and these two gentlemen who are going to run it. This workshop is about establishing operational excellence and scaling your business. So I'd first like to introduce Brendan Anderson. Come on up, Brendan. He is the founder of Scaleco Capital and a longtime ETA entrepreneur here in the Cleveland community. And Jeff Bauman, who is our facilitator in general for this whole symposium, but specifically here right now. And he is the founder and head of Ames Institute. And I turn the mic over to you.
Thank you, Aaron. Good morning, everyone, again. Can we get someone just maybe in the back to pull that door shut just so we have no background noise? I'm going to do my best here to stand still, which is a challenge for me. Aaron and I were talking about it earlier, is that there's an over-under on when I'm going to fall off one of the stages one day because I like to move around so much. As Aaron alluded to, my name's Jeff Bauman, co-founder and CEO of the Ames Institute right here in Cleveland. Really, our focus is to help businesses run more effectively and scale, right? And hopefully to do that in a way that's a lot less painful and a lot more fun. So I'm going to share some of the strategies that we use both with the companies that we own and the companies that we work with, the clients that we work with. And Brendan, you want to talk a little bit about your role and what you do and what you're going to share?
Sure. Brendan Anderson, founder of Scaleco Capital, and started out as an ETA buyer in 1998, so a couple of days ago, and we've made a lot of mistakes, and we've tried a lot of different processes and so forth. So I'm here as much to share what we've learned and the errors we've made, and also learn from Jeff because he's the true day-to-day expert at this stuff. So thank you.
All right, thanks. So what we're going to cover today, 4 things we're going to walk through in the next 40 minutes or so. Number 1. The challenges that we've experienced and the challenges that we see many business owners face today in both running and scaling their business. We're going to talk about how ETA owners can and many are overcoming some of these challenges. We'll share or unpack a couple different, what I call modern leadership practices that you can use to accelerate results and some of the examples that we've seen in doing that. And then finally, we'll unpack how to choose the best option, system, process for you based on your current situation. So I think probably the best way for me to start is to share a quick story. I was in Orlando last week and over breakfast talking to one of our clients. And we were kind of reflecting back on both of our journeys as business owners. And as we were doing that, we were talking about how the business seemed to grow and what the challenges were as we saw that happen. And he likened it really powerfully to the analogy of driving a jet ski in the early stages of running that business. So if you imagine driving a jet ski, you're agile, you can move through the water quickly as you come up on other boats, as you come up on other jet skis, buoys, whatever it might be. It's really easy to maneuver, right? And the small adjustments that you make don't seem to have a big impact on anything else. But as your company starts to grow, as you start hiring more people, as you start serving more customers or clients, as you start selling more products, it starts to seem like that jet ski is turning more into something like a cruise ship, where it's a lot harder to maneuver. You need more training, you need more people, you need systems, you need warning signals if you're going to be able to avoid the obstacles that might come your way. And as we were thinking about that, really, this journey of owning a business, running a business, and scaling a business is a lot like that. It's a lot about, starting out with a jet ski and it turning into a cruise ship, and how do you handle the challenges that come with it. If you're driving a cruise ship, as we all know, small adjustment here can have big consequences in other places, and that same thing happens with business, with people. We heard from the examples this morning and the stories that y'all shared is that people are really at the core. And so if we make a decision, it has the potential to impact many, many people. So Brent and I are going to unpack, how we and other business owners are navigating that shift from that agile jet ski to this big mammoth of a cruise ship by using what I'd like to refer to as management systems or operating systems to navigate through there. So as we think about that, let's unpack some of the common challenges that we've seen or we've experienced in launching, growing, running, scaling businesses. And I think anybody that was in this room heard from the panel where they talked about, when you run a business or when you acquire a business, you're told, and I think in a lot of respects it's true based on the stats, that running a business is high risk. Starting a business is high risk. If you look at it, after 15 years, only 20% of small businesses are still in existence, right? And so I think done the right way, your probability of success goes way up. And as I alluded to before, it can become a lot more enjoyable. So the first challenge I'd unpacked is really related to this, is as a starter of a small business, you come up with, you build a better mousetrap, right? You're the expert in the business because you've learned how to build a better product, a better service that you can bring to market. But as you start selling that mousetrap, what you realize pretty quickly is that while you're really good at building a better mousetrap, you're not necessarily great at running a mousetrap business. So as you add more people, as you have more customers, you end up working harder, right? And you put more time in, but you hit a limit to how much you can do. And so as you hit that limit, what happens is it seems like in the business, no matter how much you work, things just don't move forward unless you're involved in some form or fashion, right? So people see you as the person they have to go to for everything. Another challenge we see is kind of the opposite of that, is when you're not the expert. So typical to this environment, when you're using an ETA strategy, you go into the business and you find yourself leading, running, managing a company in a space that you're not technically the expert. Now, I found myself in a similar situation. I joke with people that I'm a recovering CPA. I'm still a CPA. But I found myself running a very large manufacturing company. And I had the slightest clue about what a die was, what it meant to run a press, what it meant to run products through an assembly line. And because I wasn't the technical expert, I recognized that I needed to pull in the expertise of the people in the organization. I needed to pull in the wisdom of the team. But to be honest, I wasn't sure exactly how to do that. Right? I thought as the leader, people were looking to me to have all the answers. And who am I? I don't have the technical expertise. When they come to me, they're going to figure out pretty quickly that I'm an imposter. Right? I don't have the answers. And in all honesty, I had to go through some pretty big challenges before I realized that the wisdom was already in the company. I just needed ways to tap into it. Which leads me to another challenge, and you hear people talk about this quite a bit, is the challenge is actually people in and of itself. Right? We this morning identified that people are at the heart of what we do, but people become a challenge that we have to work through. Right? From I guess a couple different perspectives, if I think about this, the first is as you grow the company and you add more people, you're adding complexity to the business. And we see this time and time again where we work with leaders where they've built this team, the company's running, but they're exhausted, right? Because the complexity is just something they're not used to. It's harder to keep people aligned. It's harder to stay connected to everybody. It's harder to make those adjustments that we talked about earlier. And it's harder to keep everyone happy. The second challenge when it comes to people is kind of what I experienced, is that as we added more people, it was harder to keep people engaged. It was harder to pull the ideas from them, right? It was harder to make them bring their best selves to work because we were listening. We had an approach to pull in that wisdom from them. We sense that we can get more from the people in the organization, but we're not exactly sure how. And then the third challenge, kind of if you do tap into that, as you grow your business, you realize that you need different people, right? That the people that got you to where you are aren't necessarily the people that are going to get you to the next level. But if you're the technical expert, or even if you're not, what systems, what strategies do you have in place to hire the right people, to retain those people, to develop those people, to allow them to be their best selves at work? And so what ends up happening is people become almost this burden on you instead of this asset that we can really unleash. Another challenge is, when you look at companies and you go in, and if you're acquiring a company, you realize pretty quickly, or maybe you're the person in this situation where the business is reliant on you, right? If that business owner isn't there, what's going to happen? Everybody's looking to that person because they're that expert. They're so integral to the business that it seems like the business can't run without them. And so oftentimes when you're acquiring that business, you put an earn-out in place, right, to keep the person engaged in that business, but that presents new challenges. As you try to put different systems in place, you try to work on the business, it almost seems like that owner is fighting against you. When in reality, there's ways to tap into that expertise, that wisdom, that energy that they have, but to do amazing things. And if you are the person, where the business is relying on you, we heard some examples in the first workshop in this room around how companies that don't survive, right? Because that business is so reliant on you, you're not getting the most value from it. And in a lot of cases, people throw in the towel, and it's really unfortunate. The final challenge I'll unpack here, and I want to end it with this challenge. I could probably go on for 40 minutes about the challenges we face as business owners trying to create operational excellence and scale our companies. But my job is to make you feel better, not to make you feel worse through this session. So one of the things we hear a lot with the clients that we work with is that people are resistant to change, right? I've tried to implement meetings. They want no part of it. I've tried to put processes in place and people think that's different and unusual, right? I've tried to change our org chart to really unleash the strengths of the people that we have, but people don't want that change to happen. I'm going to share with you in just a few minutes some of the things that we've realized in relation to change and what people actually think about it. The good news with all this, when you think about all these challenges or other challenges that you're having, is what we need to do as business owners, the answer to what we need to do is readily available, right? And there's a lot of good solutions out there in the market, right? Rockefeller Habits, built 100 plus years ago. This has been around for 100 plus years. It's a great system to lean into. We've seen that happen with some of the companies that we've worked with, some of the companies that we've owned. Right? In fact, a lot of the branded systems that you see out there today were built from the Rockefeller Habits. They're simplified versions of that to meet your needs today. They all have their own advantages, which we'll share a little bit later. So after experiencing some of the pain, some of the challenges, many ETA owners are looking to a management system, an operating system, to help them solve some of those biggest pain points. A disciplined way to plan, lead, and operate their business, to help us make decisions, to help us solve issues once and for all. Because when we're so busy, when we're the person that everybody's coming to for answers, issues go left unresolved. At Ames Institute, we have our own management system that we've created. It's built on the Rockefeller Habits and others. I'll talk about that in just a second. It's a strengths-based management system, right? It's a way to build on what's defined in all of those management systems, but to give you an approach that modernizes who we engage and how we engage them in that process, right? It's really a leadership philosophy in and of itself that's built, in our opinion, for the modern era. Modern era that's different. Leading today is different than any other time before us, right? The challenge that we have today is only going to get more and more complex with all the changes that we have around us. And so as we think about that, what is Ames? It's an opportunity to bring out the best in you, your team, and your business. And the thing we talk about, you heard Scott mention it this morning, is it's really an opportunity to accelerate the results that you're looking for. We've seen it without fail, actually. And I saw some stats on this with the approach that we use, the philosophy that we've bought into, is that it has a 95% success rate. I'll share with you openly, it was 100% for the longest time until we had one example where it didn't go exactly as planned. But the success rate is unbelievable, right? It consistently boosts morale, engages people, creates cultures of shared leadership, and transforms the results that you're getting as business owners simultaneously. How? Through creating engaging conversations. The Ames what, right? All systems that are out there are good. They give you the disciplines that you need. Ames has, similar ones to all of those other systems. The only subtle difference I would say with AIMS is that ours is a strengths-based methodology. And so what does that mean? We actually pull from each of those different systems. I've used all of them. I've tried all of them. I've used them in different environments. Our companies have used different ones, right? And we've pulled from the best of those to create this one. It doesn't matter which system you use, it's going to give you some really good disciplines as it relates to how do you operate efficiently. It's going to take some of that pain, some of those challenges out of running your business. The difference with AIMS, I would say, is it gives you, like I said before, a modernized approach to the way, like who you engage in the conversations that you're having and how you engage them in those conversations. It's about moving from the select few leaders in the room. We're going to get 3 leaders, 5 leaders out of 80 people into a room, and we're going to come up with strategies. How do you bring more people into those conversations from the get-go? So that you're not just as leaders trying to convince people of what needs to be done, you're co-creating the things that are right for the business based on the energy of the team, the people in your organization. In terms of how it's moving away from problems focused, what's wrong, broken, missing in our organization, to possibilities focused. Moving away from us as leaders, as I mentioned before, being the ones that have to have all the answers, to us as leaders asking the right questions. And when we ask the right questions, different things emerge. So what do we do at AIMS? We do 3 things, right? We work with organizations at the level of the individual, the leaders. How do you change the way you think, talk, and act? How do you yourself think about change, drive change with the people that you're leading? How do your teams approach change? And finally, how do you implement the management system itself, the strategic side of the business, using AIMS practices? In our experience, AIMS practices dramatically simplify not just what you need to do, but how you do it. So I want to give you a couple examples, and I'm going to turn over to Brendan to share his experience and some of the systems that he's implemented as well. Some examples of what we've seen with AIMS. The first one is one of our clients. When we started working with this client, they were implementing EOS. And as the owner was trying to implement EOS through an acquisition strategy, he came into this organization, he was faced with that same resistance that I shared earlier. The organization didn't have meetings. They didn't have documented processes. They didn't have an org chart. And as he tried to implement some of those things, the resistance wall came up. And he got to a point where he didn't know what to do. He's like, I'm lost. I don't know how to get people excited about the things that I think I can add to the business, because he wasn't the expert. And so he leaned into these AIMS practices on top of EOS. He brought people into the conversations that they were having on a weekly basis, on a quarterly basis, on an annual basis, and from a strategic planning perspective. And what they saw in under 2 years was that their revenue went from 3 million to 12 million in an industry where everybody else was laying people off, right? Transformational, exponential results. Not only that, that business owner today is working 50% of the time than he was a year and a half ago. Another result, one of the companies in our portfolio implemented AIMS. So they had adopted a different management system. I won't say the name because I don't want to diminish anything that that system offered. But in implementing that system, it got them to a point, and what they found was they started to retract backwards because of some of the outdated practices in that system. And so through some individual coaching and some team coaching with that organization, they fully adopted AIMS. They made this dramatic shift. And what they saw was going into this, they were unprofitable and their engagement was extremely low. In less than 6 months, they went from 43% engagement to 81%. And it translated into bottom line impact of almost 1.8 million. Right? They're doing amazing things now. That owner is also stepping back from his role in the business. Another example, this is another client of ours. So this is a client in a different environment, a very large manufacturing company. It's one division within that large manufacturing company where through individual coaching with us, the plant manager was able to immediately see a reduction in inventory of $2 million, right? Huge impact on their working capital. And really what he did was change the way he thinks. He changed the way he was interacting with employees, and he was changing the actions that he was doing. His biggest challenge, which I think many people can probably relate to, is holding people accountable. Right? The feedback that he'd gotten from his team is he never held anybody accountable. And when he started to see that as a gift that he could give to other people and his team, everything turned around. So you hear those results and you're probably wondering, well, that sounds good. But what are the actual strategies? What's beneath that? What enables you to get those kind of results? And so I want to share really 4 of the practices that we lean into time and time again. 4 practices that if you're willing to take that leap, I'm pretty confident you can get some of these similar results. So practice number 1 is really related. The first 2 practices are related to who you engage in the conversations that you're having. Because if you're like me, as a recovering CPA, if you had told me years ago, Jeff, just bring more people into your conversations, I'm like, you're nuts. It's going to turn into utter chaos. You need an approach to do that, right? The first are about, why do you want to bring people in? The second are, how do you do it? So the first is tap into the wisdom of the group. Leaders in the modern era realize, right, that the knowledge and the wisdom of a group of people is superior to any individual, right? The highest performing teams, there's studies on it. You look at Google, you look at other organizations, the highest performing teams have a highly collaborative environment where the leader is pulling in the knowledge and wisdom, the passion of everybody involved, right? When you can unleash people's strengths and configure them in different ways around things that they're energized by, amazing things happen. Practice number 2 is to create an environment where people belong. There's a lot of talk out there. This is where I go totally off script. There's a lot of talk out there about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think it starts with diversity and inclusion. Bring the right, different people into your conversations and make them feel included. Right? That's it. When we do that, we create belonging. When we create belonging, we create an opportunity for real diversity, equity, and inclusion. Right? So having a way to bring more voices in because you understand how to create psychological safety in the room. Right? Belonging begins with safety. There's practices that we instill in leaders that help them create an environment where people feel seen, where they feel heard, where they feel understood, and where they're valued. So that enables you to bring more people into the conversations. What do you do when you have them in the conversations? Well, the first thing we talk about is practice number 3 is focus on what you want most. I talked about moving from problems to possibilities. What we've learned, and it's not just me, it's 40 years in the making, is that whatever we focus on, we find more of. Right? You notice when you buy a new vehicle, let's say you buy a Jeep. I don't own a Jeep, but let's say you buy a Jeep. What do you instantly notice on the road? How many Jeeps are on the road, right? What we focus on, we will find more of. So if you as a leader focus on problems, what are you going to find more of? Problems. And when you focus on problems with your team, how does that feel? When I shared all those challenges before, it sucks the energy out of the room. Right? The good news is when you change your focus, when you focus on possibilities, you automatically solve the problems, but you create new opportunities. Right? So AIMS leaders recognize that what we pay attention to, what we inquire into, grows in nature, which leads us to practice number 4. When we do that, when we focus more on what we want, when we inquire into the things that we want through open-ended questions, beautiful things happen. What we've seen is the ability, as I mentioned before, is the sign of a true genius of a leader today is to ask the right questions, to ask open-ended questions that move us towards those things that we want. Questions are fateful. Soon as we ask a different question, the future changes before the answers even arise. So bring a group of people together, create psychological safety, focus on what you want, and ask questions that move you towards that. You will automatically start to see changes in your organization. I won't go into detail on this. Really, the AIMS approach, the AIMS management system, is built off 40 years of proven science, right here in Cleveland, right here at Case Western Reserve University, through David Cooperrider, right? I don't need to share all the science behind this. I just want to share with you that it works. It really does work. And so I want to turn it over to Brendan now. We had a great conversation yesterday actually about this. And I want him to share a little bit about his journey, the companies he acquires, how he leans into management systems, the importance of management systems, and some of the results that he's experienced as well in using different systems. Brian?
No, thank you, Jeff. I think about when you buy a business, you're really just trying to create a common vision. You got to create the values to attract the right people, and kind of make so that everybody knows where you're going. And it's not that easy. And what I think that when you adopt an operating system, what you're doing is creating a common language, a language in which everybody can communicate. You can speed things up, and quite frankly, you give people a chance to step up and play a bigger role in the company, or step out. Right? There's a lot of times that when you make an investment in a company, they say, hey, Brennan's nuts, I'm going to move on, and that's fine, right? I mean, it helps everybody. And so we've tried. I mentioned I bought my first kind of operating company in 1998. I hadn't heard the Rockefeller Habits reference in a long time, but we were using Rockefeller Habits, and we kind of struggled with it. It was a little, it was very complex. I didn't love the idea of the morning huddles and some other things, but it really made some progress. And then, Gino Wickman kind of took us, the 80-20 stuff out of Rockefeller Habits. And so we have been using kind of a EOS plus model, but it's not a hard and fast rule. Kind of talk maybe in the next session about some of the other things we're able to do. In the EOS world, it's a start, and then what I would say is that it processes, and I'm going to ask Jeff a question here in a minute, but processes in my experience always work when you get top management's buy-in. And so what it really does is it lets, and if you're part of top management, then obviously you better buy in. But it also lets you decide. I think there was many times where we would train and work with people, all the way from top management to middle management. And now I think what happens is within the first, as long as we're going to lean in heavily to the process, we believe that within the first maybe 6-9 months, you really know who sees the vision and is willing to play by the rules, and it lets you just move much faster. I was going to ask you a question. You said the success rate. Have you ever had a situation where senior leadership didn't buy in?
Never. No, I'm just kidding. 100%. It's actually one of the biggest challenges, right, in trying to get people to adopt a different way of leading, operating, planning their business. And so I anticipated that you're going to ask that question, actually. One of the shifts that we made as an organization and what the work that we do is moving away from just helping a company implement the management system, the strategic part of it, and really working with the individual leader. Because what we realized is, as leaders, the top leadership of the team, they needed to adopt some certain shifts first. They needed to believe in those shifts. And if we worked with them individually, they could immediately start implementing things to see what happened as a result of thinking, acting, talking differently. And just those subtle shifts that they had opened them up to a new possibility, a new approach, a new way of thinking about a management system that they could incorporate. In the past, when we didn't do that, in all honesty, we faced a lot of resistance, because the top leadership team would I'm not doing that. That seems like a big change. That's something different. Why are we fixing something that's not broken? Right? Because they hadn't actually tangibly touched or experienced the changes themselves.
Jeff mentioned something earlier too about picking a process and going with it and so forth. And we invested in a company in Detroit called Budco Financial 12 years ago. We still have a pretty large interest in it. And they were a Ford supplier, so they were using QoS, the quality operating system, kind of an Edwards Demings. And we didn't ask them to change it. They, as long as our team could get up to speed quickly on kind of their language, how they operated, you'll find that there's a lot of overlap in these processes and these systems, and as long as your senior management team is buying off on one, we're thrilled to ride along. Usually, we're investing so early in a process where we'll invest in a company where the manager really wants to leave. We've invested in a company where they only had one customer. We're truly trying to fix. Enhance the company and get it in a spot where a lot of other people would be interested in buying it. But so I just kind of getting a system, getting a process, getting a language is. Building that team, vision, values, goals is really the most important thing to me.
I love that, and I love how you referred to common language, right? The disciplines do work, and as Brennan was sharing his example of EOS, and we hear it a lot, right? It's EOS plus plus, right? It's the practices that we adopt as leaders and how we approach implementing those different systems that really become the key differentiators for you. So one thing I want to give you right now is this. If you scan that QR code, there's no email required. I'll qualify that. I'm not asking for an email here. I'm actually terrible at selling this stuff. It's because I believe in it so wholeheartedly that I don't really feel the need to. But if you scan that QR code, you'll get a nice comparison between EOS, scaling up, and the AIMS management system. And I'm not here to sell you on one. I'm here to encourage you to lean into them and think about the practices you're instilling as leaders in your companies. But it'll tell you who each system is best for, some of the underlying methodology, and the things that you can be thinking about. I will share with you, because I am a little bit biased, if you want to experience AIMS, there's a couple ways that you can do that. You can schedule a free discovery call to find out how it works, or we have a special opportunity where Scott asked us to run a specific cohort. We have a Changemakers program, which is an opportunity for you to learn the practices as you lead a change with your team in your organization. So if you're a business owner or you have someone in your business that you want to be that key operational person, you want to help them drive change, it's a great way to implement a change in your business while you learn the practices. We're having a free workshop on November 7th. I had to check the date there, where you can learn a little bit more about that. I want to create some space here in the last 12 or 13 minutes to open it up to questions. I know Jim in the room had a whole bunch of questions for Brendan. No, I'm just kidding. But we want to open up to your questions. What do you have for Brendan or myself? Jim does have a question.
Keep the mic away from Jim.
Well, I can speak loud enough, but hey, Brendan, can you talk a little bit about how much, so you're buying a business, you have this management leadership in place. How much are you talking during the purchase process, acquisition process, about how things are going to look in the future, right? So I've been running my business, ... What happens tomorrow? Because we're talking about EOS Plus and whatever, and how much of that dialogue takes place?
Yeah, no, great question. And ideally, it's a whole lot. I mean, every seller is a little different. Every seller has a certain degree of confidentiality they want to hold. But ideally, it would be a complete open book. We would explain to them what EOS is. We would introduce them to some of the other leaders. We would let them meet our team, and we've spent a lot of time building out our team in that EOS Plus comment, and so probably Jeff's got all that stuff in his system, but and so it's big. But what I'd also say, Jim, is that what's amazing to me, and been at this for almost 30 years, is sometimes the seller hear what they want to hear. They think they want to be involved. They think they want to follow the process. They've read the book and so forth, and then, as long as we're having a completely transparent experience, pre and post, it's amazing to me how often they come and say, "Hey, Brendan, I don't really want to be," and I'll use it from my point of view. They would have a different one. I don't really want to be held accountable on a day-to-day basis, and so it's that's where I say moving faster in the process and feeling good about it. Usually they'll come to us and say, "Hey, I either want to change the role I originally thought I was going to play, or hey, I am going to go to Florida, or one case Michigan." So.
One of the things that I think is really important, we have a step-by-step process similar to EOS, but what we really focus on with the companies we acquire, or the clients that we work with, is figuring out what the right next thing is. So not going in and saying, "Hey, we're going to do A, B, C, D, E, all the way through." It's saying, "Okay, this is where we see the best opportunity to implement something today." And then what we do is we bring everybody into that conversation. We're not telling people what we're doing. We involve them in the conversation. And typically what happens is, because they're part of co-creating, they're like, "Oh, this was good. What do we do next?" Right? And so one of the examples with the company that went from 3 to 12 million, we didn't go in and say, "Hey, we're going to move away from EOS. We're going to do this." We just said, "Hey, why don't we all come together and talk about something that I've heard from each of the team members, is our values." Right? Brendan listed out some of the core things you need to do. He said, "Let's talk about our values, and let's co-create the values and behaviors that we think are important to keep, to nurture, to protect as we move forward." So they did that, and they were super energized by it. They're like, "Okay, what's next?" We said, well, why don't we work together to create an org chart? Which sounds counterintuitive. Like, what kind of leader gets everybody in the room to create the org chart? But it was actually the EOS accountability chart that we created. And we used a slightly different approach where we talked about what are the requirements of the business without people in there. And then we went through and said, what's everybody's strengths in the room? And we had people share what they thought other people's strengths were. And then they put themselves into the roles that made the most sense. What was really interesting about that is the project manager in this organization ended up becoming the general manager within a year because everybody else saw that in her, right? They were like, she's the person. She's the integrator in the case of the EOS model, right? And she's doing amazing things as a result. So figuring out what that right next thing is, and then using an approach that gets people to buy in naturally, not forcing them to do it because you think it's the right thing. Great question, Jim.
Hi, one of your examples talked about employee engagement, and I'm wondering how you measured that.
So that particular company has an employee survey that they do on a 6-month basis. So they did it in December of last year, and then they reran it in July. And the measurements are actually from their survey. I don't have the details, but I mean I could get it. It's a pretty comprehensive one they pulled in from outside. Yeah, this is a fairly large organization. They have about 100 people, so they adopted that methodology years ago. Great question though.
We also just we've used Culture Index, which has it sets a baseline against what their skills are and how they're viewing those skills are being used in the organization. And we find there's a pretty solid direct correlation to if they're working on things that they truly believe are their strengths, that they are happier.
Yeah, we use Culture Index for small companies as well.
Uh-oh.
First of all, I want to try out the mic, see if it works. But I want to say I had Coop Ryder twice,
Yes.
and I also had Gorilla Osborne twice. And Coop Ryder is the most gifted person in the world.
Yep.
Sometimes I think he was way up here, and I think what you've done in your presentations, because I didn't know what you were doing, I felt it, but I did not. It's amazing. So EOS is in all the best, usually middle market, lower middle market companies. But to add the layer of AIMS on top is probably the only way you're really going to fly.
Yeah.
So I just thank you for putting this together. It's a
you.
great presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, and I agree with you on everything you said. One of the things that I'm extremely passionate about is how do we take that secret sauce that David created and bring it into how we lead every day. And that's the mission that we're on. Yeah.
First time ever you haven't asked a question, so I'm a little disappointed.
Somebody's got a burning question.
I actually just want to share a resource that I think could be complementary. I'm with Burton D. Morgan Foundation. Burt Morgan was a serial entrepreneur and started his foundation because he believed entrepreneurs were important to our ecosystem, free enterprise, and he felt he should build them up. I oversee what we call second stage entrepreneurs with 1 to 50 million in revenue, and we are now fully funding for those entrepreneurs a variety of programs, leadership programs, Scalerator, if anyone's heard of that, CEO retreats, roundtables, and one-on-one consulting for leaders for dealing with challenges or hurdles they might be experiencing. So it could be a good resource for you with some of the businesses you're working with, and I'm happy to talk to anyone later about it.
That'd be awesome. Thank you. I think there was a question up here as well. Yeah. Do just wait for the mic here. Let's see Aaron run.
You talked about when you go into a business and you keep an owner on an earnout, and then you have to get them on board with the management system, but then they may be fighting against you. Have you been in a situation where the owner's on board, they want to do it, they've bought in, but they're not really getting very involved in the same way that you're bringing your team on board and getting their feedback and getting their buy-in? They're not that involved, even though they're they say they're on board.
So probably the best example I can share two different ones. So yes, we've had one example where, remember I told you all that 95% success rate? The one was the exact example you're talking about. The owner said they were on board, weren't really, and they were actually undermining the process. What's really interesting about that is you think about it, they were the expert in the business. They had all the technical know-how, but what we saw really quickly in the room was that other people had the technical know-how, but were being pushed down. One person actually in the room said, "Oh, I'd love to take on responsibility for that," and then turned to the previous owner and said, well, I don't want to take anything away from you, right? Backed away from it because of that. And so we needed to work through some different strategies on how to manage that. A different example I give you is someone who said they were like super supportive. They were coming to the meetings, but the whole time in the meetings, they were skeptical. They're like, yeah, but what about this? Yeah, but what about this? What was really important in that case was to bring their voice into the conversation, to recognize that there was tension, right? To check in with, it was a her in this case, to check in on breaks. Like, hey, what are you thinking right now? What's top of mind for you? Do you have any concerns? And then openly bringing them into the conversation so that the team could work through them. We had amazing results with that particular example.
I think if you run the process correctly and you're being very transparent, there comes a point in time where, first of all, we've used earnouts in the past. I would strongly suggest not using them, especially in a relatively short-term thing. We like them at the kind of the extreme back end. But if you run the process correctly, I think you can reach a meeting of the minds as to the best role for them. Maybe by month 6, 3 to 6.
Thank you. I'm going to cut it off right there because there's a break coming for y'all. Thank you, Brendan and Jeff. Please, a round of applause for the two gentlemen. Thank you. To show our appreciation, we have a gift bag for you both. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We also made a donation in your name to the Effective Leadership Academy to try and continue this on. For all of you, next up, you have a 15-minute break. It is currently, do you really have 15 minutes? You do, you have 16 minutes. 11:30 is the start of the next session. The next session here is, what is the next session here? Is preparing for a premium sale. And you can be here at 11:30. We will go to 12:15. Once again, all of these are recorded, so you will be getting them sent to you. Check out the page 3 for the rest of the day's agendas, and go meet somebody new. Thank you.